Warning: the following video will include spoilers for both shows. Viewers' discretion is advised.
In Arcane, we constantly see the characters face some kind of impossible question. Am I Powder, or am I Jinx? Can I accept my sister for who she is now, or is she too far gone? Can I bring progress to Piltover without compromising my moral code? Will I choose my nation, or my daughter? Now, as complex as Arcane is, even then, as the viewer, it's always easy to say what you think is the easiest answer. Well, if I was in that position, I'd do this. That wasn't until a friend of mine presented me with my own impossible question. Does Arcane dethrone Avatar: The Last Airbender? When Avatar: The Last Airbender premiered on Nickelodeon, I was only 7 years old. Initially, I thought it'd be just like any other cartoon, but I quickly realized it was something extraordinary. Although many of its mature themes went over my head at the time, I remember still being captivated by its uniqueness. Rewatching it as an adult, it was only then that I was able to truly grasp its depth and its complexity. Avatar will always hold a special place in my heart, filled with childhood memories and nostalgia. Now, obviously since 2005, there have been many incredible shows, both live action and animated. An honorable mention is Blue Eye Samurai, which was also released on Netflix and was a huge success. Like, seriously, if you haven't watched it, you really need to get on that. It's honestly so good. But none of them, in my opinion, has come close to surpassing Avatar. That is, until Arcane. But what is it exactly that makes Arcane so special? Arcane has emerged as a formidable contender, setting a new standard in animated storytelling with its intricate plots, rich character development, mature themes, and I mean, just look at this animation. The animators did their big one. Arcane has reshaped my understanding of what animated series can achieve in a world that often views animation as media for children, which is just crazy. In the world of animated series, few shows have achieved the acclaim and the enduring legacy of Avatar. Today, I'll explore how Arcane not only matches, but might possibly surpass Avatar in character development, themes, and storytelling. Now, as someone who has loved Avatar my entire life, this was not an easy video to make. And going into this video, please realize that it is subjective. In no way am I saying that you have to think that Arcane is better than Avatar. I realize that this could even possibly be a controversial take. Nevertheless, let's get into why I think Arcane dethrones Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, I'm not going to go into depth and bore you with the details concerning every character, as there are countless YouTube video essays that thoroughly explore the arcs, ideologies, and motivations of characters in both of these shows. If you're watching this, you're likely already familiar with them. Instead, I want to focus on how these shows handle morality, especially in the context of war and oppressive governments, and how these heavier concepts are reflected in their characters. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how the target audience for these shows is a component of this. While Avatar isn't just a show for kids, I still want to acknowledge that it was released on Nickelodeon, a television network that primarily targets children and teens, and sometimes complex themes, especially dealing with morality, can be harder to convey to a younger audience. In Avatar, it's generally clear who we're rooting for. The gang are portrayed as the protagonists fighting against the oppressive Fire Nation. While the show does introduce morally gray characters, like Zuko, the audience is given a clear picture of the heroes and the villains. The protagonist's journey are marked by growth, learning, and ultimately triumph over evil. This clarity allows viewers to fully invest in the hero's quest and root for their success. For example, let's look at Aang and Ozai. Aang is the epitome of goodness and righteousness. He is compassionate, a pacifist through and through, and committed to maintaining balance in the world. Throughout the series, Aang consistently demonstrates a strong moral compass, which even leads to him to struggle with the responsibilities of being the Avatar, while trying to adhere to his principles of nonviolence and mercy. His journey is one of growth and understanding, but his inherent goodness and dedication to peace never waver. Fire Lord Ozai, on the other hand, represents pure evil. As a leader of the Fire Nation, he seeks to dominate and control the world through fear and violence. Ozai's actions are driven by nothing more than a lust for power and a belief in the superiority of the Fire Nation. He lacks any redeeming qualities or moments of doubt, clocking him as a clear antagonist. The lack of moral ambiguity in their conflict is stark. Aang's mission to stop Ozai and restore balance is portrayed as just and necessary, while Ozai's ambitions are depicted as inherently wrong and destructive. Arcane, however, pushes this concept a bit further. In both shows, characters are driven by past traumas and injustices, often inflicted by oppressive governments. However, the nature and consequences of these motivations are presented differently. In Avatar, characters like Zuko and Katara have their goals shaped by personal losses and the overarching tyranny of the Fire Nation. Zuko's quest for honor and Katara's fight against oppression are deeply rooted in the afflictions they've endured. Despite this, the Fire Nation's actions, such as the genocide of the air nomads and the subsequent 100-year war of colonization and terror, are unequivocally condemned. The narrative makes it clear that the Fire Nation's brutal methods are unjustifiable, and no one is expected to empathize with their genocidal actions. On the other hand, Arcane presents a world where moral lines are blurred, and understanding the motivations of all sides becomes more challenging. Characters in Arcane navigate a landscape of systematic inequality and personal vendettas, with their choices reflecting the complex interplay of survival, ambition, and ideology. Let's look at characters Vander and Silco from Arcane. Vander, once a fierce revolutionary, evolves into a protector who believes in maintaining a fragile peace between Zahn and Piltover. Haunted by the violence of the past, he adopts a more cautious and diplomatic approach to protect his community and the children he's taken under his wing. Vander's actions are driven by a desire to prevent further bloodshed and create a safer environment for those that he loves. But we come to see that his reluctance to engage in conflict and his compromises with the authorities of Piltover are seen by some as weakness or betrayal of Zahn's fight for freedom. Now, contrast that with Silco, who remains heavily devoted to Zahn's independence and willing to use any means necessary to achieve it. His methods are ruthless, often involving manipulation and violence. Silco sees himself as a visionary, unafraid to make difficult decisions for what he believes is the greater good of Zahn. To him, Vander's pacifism is a betrayal of their shared dream, and he perceives his own brutal tactics as the only viable path to true freedom for Zahn. This dynamic exemplifies moral ambiguity because viewers can understand and empathize with both perspectives. Vander's desire for peace and safety is noble and relatable, especially in his role as a father figure to the children. On the other hand, Silco's relentless pursuit of freedom, though extreme, highlights the desperation and determination of an oppressed people willing to fight for their rights at any cost. Both characters are flawed and driven by their convictions, making it difficult to categorize either as purely right or wrong. The dynamic between Jace and Victor illustrates this nuanced portrayal of ambition and ethics. Jace's desire to improve the world through technology and Victor's pursuit of scientific progress are both noble at their core, yet their methods and the consequences of their actions are riddled with moral dilemmas. The show continually challenges viewers to understand and empathize with characters on both sides of the conflict, even as they grapple with the fallout of their decisions. While Avatar offers a clear moral framework with its heroes and villains, Arcane thrives on the complexities of its characters and their motivations. This moral ambiguity forces viewers to constantly reassess their perceptions of right and wrong, creating what I feel is a more nuanced and thought-provoking narrative. To discuss the themes of the two shows, I think we should first establish what a story theme is. Themes are universal ideas derived from a story's narrative and literary symbols that can be interpreted differently depending on the person. While they are subjective and can vary, a lot of the times a dominant theme is highlighted and often stands out. Television shows have the unique ability to explore these complex themes through rich narratives and multidimensional characters, engaging audiences on a deeper and more personal level. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't until I came back to Avatar as an adult that I picked up on the show's more mature themes. Throughout the series, we see the show tackle darker themes like genocide, imperialism, colonialism, trauma, and abuse. And that's not even all of them. The way they were able to subtly convey that to a younger audience while managing to keep the show lighthearted and fun is a testament in itself to the powerhouse that Avatar is. Arcane also tackles mature themes pertaining to mental health, political intrigue, and class struggles. Sounds familiar, right? It was then that I had to ask myself, why do these shows feel so different? And why does Arcane seemingly resonate with me more? Let's examine how these two shows handle mental health. As society becomes more open to discussing mental health and its effects, it's compelling to see these issues portrayed on screen. However, writing mental health issues into characters can be challenging. If not handled with care, it can come across as insensitive and make the story fall flat, leaving the characters feeling cheap. Thankfully, this is not the case for either of these shows. In Avatar, mental health struggles are primarily embodied by Azula, especially in Book 3, as she descends into madness. Losing her grasp on control and succumbing to the paranoia after perceived betrayals, Azula's unraveling is put on display for all of those around her to see. Up until this point, Azula has been calculated, confident, and seemingly unfazed by whatever is thrown her way. She wasn't my favorite character for no reason. However, her facade begins to crack in the beach episode, where her pain and her insecurities are revealed, particularly in her relationship with her mother. We come to see that Azula's ideology of choosing fear over love stems from this source of pain. And while the dam finally breaks in the finale, while, yes, you want to sympathize with her, you're also relieved that she's been subdued, and that good has once again triumphed over evil. Now, I do want to acknowledge that there is more depth surrounding Azula and her mental state in the comics. So, if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend reading. Let's compare this to how Arcane handles mental health through Jinx. When we first meet her, she isn't the Jinx players know from the games. Right off the bat, we're introduced to a young and impressionable little girl by the name of Powder. We all know how her story goes. She's rattled by her insecurities. Sure, she's a sharpshooter and she has a knack for tinkering, but none of her inventions ever really seem to work, and it's something that she's constantly reminded of. Her desperate want and need to prove herself as an asset to the team, as opposed to being the liability, as well as her overall fear of abandonment, leads to the eventual demise of her second-hand family. Although an accident, the guilt runs so deep she carries it with her into her adulthood. When we're later reintroduced to her, now as Jinx, we see just how much of an effect that trauma had on her. With Jinx, we're able to connect with her when she was Powder. Unlike Azula, whose backstory is mostly revealed through flashbacks, with Powder, we don't see flashbacks of her childhood in the Undercity. For 3 episodes, we experience it with her. She's not introduced as a textbook villain that we're later told this is why she is the way she is. We get to see her first as a sympathetic character, a young girl who just wants to help save her family, and in doing so, fails miserably. This, in my opinion, makes her transformation into Jinx more impactful and tragic. I remember seeing Azula crash out after Zuko, then Katara, literally mopped the floor with her. And my initial thoughts were, good riddance, it's finally over. Don't get me wrong, I definitely sympathize with Azula. Like Jinx, both characters are manipulated and have their identity shaped and distorted by their toxic fathers. Yet, in Arcane Season 1 finale, as Jinx sets off the rocket to annihilate the Council and officially start the war between Zahn and Piltover, in that moment I wasn't angry. I wasn't disappointed. Hell, I hadn't even seen her as a villain. I was simply devastated. In that moment, I felt that even I had failed her. That the world had failed Powder. When discussing certain aspects of storytelling, people tend not to realize how much of an impact pacing could have on a story. Pacing in storytelling refers to the speed and rhythm at which a narrative unfolds. It encompasses how quickly or slowly the plot progresses, the timing of key events, the balance between action and quieter moments, and just the overall structure of the story. Effective pacing ensures that the audience remains engaged and are able to experience the story's emotional beats at the right moments. Poor pacing can lead to a narrative that feels rushed or dragged out, making it difficult for viewers to stay invested. With only one season under its belt, Arcane is comprised of 9 episodes, equally divided into 3 acts. At first glance, this might not seem like enough time to tell a compelling story, especially when compared to Avatar, which averaged around 20 episodes per season. And I mean, I do realize that 40-minute episodes versus 25 to 30-minute episodes also plays a factor in all of this. However, Arcane manages to deliver an incredibly engaging and well-paced narrative, with multiple intertwined plots that maintain a constant sense of urgency and excitement. I was amazed at how much story they were able to pack into just 9 episodes, and even more with how emotionally invested I became in such a short time. I don't know if you guys have seen my series of reactions to Arcane, but it had your girl full on sobbing on the internet at 9 o'clock in the morning. Friggin' first issue of the day! In contrast, Avatar has a more episodic nature, particularly in its earlier seasons, which allowed for more filler episodes. That's not to say it's a bad thing, and as a lover of world building, especially in fantasy-based shows, I personally enjoy having a filler episode sprinkled in every now and then. It allows you to take a break from the main narrative and appreciate the world and its more minor characters, making it feel real and lived in. Now, I've heard some people say that Season 1 perhaps had too much filler, but I want to go on record and say this is something I think Avatar actually balanced pretty well. But at the end of the day, when you're watching a show where your emotions are constantly fluctuating and the stakes are always high, being able to pick up right where you left off is so much more rewarding than halting the main narrative. Speaking of fluctuating emotions, I can't remember the last time a series has had me constantly on the edge of my seat. This is just another component as to why Arcane surpasses Avatar for me. As I mentioned earlier, when watching Avatar, there was never a doubt in my mind that good would not triumph over evil. Yes, Aang had his low points where he lost faith along his journey and struggled with the fact that he would ultimately have to be the one to face Ozai and possibly kill him in the name of peace. And that inner turmoil was felt, but regardless of what he went through, I guess the audience knew Aang would overcome, that he would find a way to defeat the Fire Lord and bring balance back to the world. It was expected of him being highlighted as the hero of the series, and those expectations were met in the finale when Aang did just that. With the new movement of subverting your audience's expectations becoming a lot more prevalent today, when handled tastefully, it can feel like an ironically satisfying sucker punch. Game of Thrones did this masterfully in its earlier seasons, and the most infamous example being The Red Wedding. That is, if you weren't a book reader. This was subverting expectations done right, not whatever this was. When the narrative takes unexpected turns that actually make sense, it maintains a sense of excitement and suspense, drawing viewers deeper into the story. Unpredictable plot twists tend to evoke stronger emotional reactions, further challenging conventional storytelling norms. I think you know where I'm going with this. When I started Arcane, initially I thought it'd be similar to Avatar in the sense that we'd follow this group of kids as they navigate the cards life dealt them in the midst of war. The first 2 episodes were adventurous and fun. And the entire time, we see Powder take L after L after L, and we see Vi continuously encourage her that one day all of her efforts would eventually pay off. So when we see the kids in a dire situation, where Powder is once again excluded and overlooked, you think, or at least I did, this has to be her big moment, her underdog moment. Powder is finally going to save the day and prove to not only herself, but to everyone that doubted her that she is, in fact, not a liability. No! And then episode 3 happened. No, wait. I was left devastated, confused, and just utterly blindsided. This wasn't the story I had been expecting. Instead of the familiar path of redemption and victory, Arcane took a darker, more complex route, shattering my assumptions and leaving me with a narrative that was far more emotionally resonant and unpredictable. It was in that moment that I realized Arcane wasn't just another animated series. It was something far more profound. Now, I could not talk about why I think Arcane surpasses Avatar in storytelling without bringing up what I feel is the anchor of my thesis: the animation. For more casual viewers, I know this probably seems extremely trivial, but as someone who has studied animation, and I'm sure other creatives out there can relate, I simply could not stop gushing about just how insanely gorgeous this show looked. Kudos to Fortiche Studios and everyone that was involved in the creative process. Arcane relies heavily on its groundbreaking visuals to convey key elements of its story, setting it apart in a league of its own. And don't just take my word for it. There are countless YouTube video essays that go into depth about how Arcane's animation elevates its storytelling. I mean, the fight between Jinx and Echo on the bridge in episode 7 is a prime example, showcasing visual storytelling at its finest. Now, I acknowledge that this comparison might seem a bit unfair, considering that Avatar's animation is from an earlier era. Debuting in 2005, while its animation was groundbreaking for its time, it was still bound by the technological limitations of that period. With Arcane's more recent release in 2021, its creators were given access to more cutting-edge animation tools and techniques, allowing them to push the boundaries of what's possible in the medium. The 16-year gap between the two shows represents a vast leap in technological advancement, enabling Arcane to achieve a level of detail that most likely wasn't achievable when Avatar was made. However, what truly sets Arcane apart isn't just the advantage of modern technology. It's how the show leverages these advancements to enhance its storytelling. The ability to render detailed facial expressions that capture even the subtlest emotions and reactions, the use of dynamic lighting, and can we get into these transitions? Each of those components allows Arcane to convey emotion and narrative depth in a way that feels so cinematic. In a way that's both satisfying and frustrating, I feel like Arcane has spoiled animation for me. The quality is unparalleled, and after finishing the series, I found myself searching in vain for another animated show or film that can match its seamless blend of style and substance. Typically, this level of animation is reserved for feature films, but to experience it in a television series is truly extraordinary. I think it's safe to say that Arcane has set a new standard for what animation can achieve, not just as a medium for storytelling, but as an art form in its own right. It challenges the boundaries of what's possible in a television series, offering a visual experience that's equally emotionally resonant and aesthetically stunning. While Avatar remains a beloved classic, Arcane represents the future of animation. A future where every frame is a literal work of art, and every detail enhances the narrative in ways we've never seen before. Honestly, I never thought a show would come along and have me question whether it was better than the childhood staple that Avatar has always been. My love for Avatar has always stood above anything that followed. It was the show that made me realize what I wanted to do with my life: to reach people through stories I create. Avatar is the reason I fell in love with art, with stories, with creativity, and even now as I reflect on it, I know it will always hold a special place in my heart. While Avatar will forever be the spark that ignited my imagination, Arcane shattered the limits of what I thought animation could achieve. It challenged my perspectives and stirred something deep within me, reminding me that a story can transcend mere entertainment. It can become an experience, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of it. Arcane entered my life at a time when I was losing that spark, and that love for what I once dreamed of doing, which is creating. But as I watched, something within me was reignited by the brilliance of this show. What I had thought was a long-lost passion transformed back into the greatest of joys and the deepest of passions. And as we anticipate the release of Season 2 this November, I can only hope that Arcane continues to deliver that same excellence that has captivated so many. No. Myself included. That's not how it ends. How much do we have in the episode? No! And when it does, Arcane will undoubtedly solidify its place as one of the greatest animated series of all time. And that is why I think Arcane dethrones Avatar: The Last Airbender.